Social media's influence on society, politics, and our well-being cannot be overstated. It has literally changed the world in the most profound of ways. Around 5 billion people, over 60% of the world's population, now spend their time there. And that number is only likely to grow faster in the coming years. It's an alternative reality for 30% of users who express their most extreme feelings and opinions. It's also a transformative business model, harvesting our data in ways we're only really starting to comprehend. In this show, we're talking to one of the pioneers of social media, Mark Weinstein, about his concerns and what we can do to take back control. Tune in for an important conversation on The Evolving Leader.
Hey folks, welcome to The Evolving Leader, a show born from the belief that we need deeper, more accountable, and more human leadership to confront the world's biggest challenges. I'm Scott Allender.
And I'm John Gomes.
How are you feeling today, Mr. Gomes? What are you bringing with you today?
I am bringing hope. That's what I'm bringing. I've had a redefinition of the word given an event I went to last week, which is making a big distinction between optimism and hope. From a kind of generational perspective, and so I'm bringing hope. How about you, Scott? How are you feeling?
I'm ready to receive your hope. I need some hope. I'm feeling a bit activated. I'm feeling I don't know when this is going to go up, but we're facing a monumental election in the U.S. next week, and I'm feeling a lot related to that. But I'm feeling along with that. Gratitude to be back with you today in the studio, and excited to have the conversation we're about to have, because today we're joined by Mark Weinstein. Mark is a world-renowned tech entrepreneur, contemporary thought leader, privacy expert, and one of the visionary inventors of social networking. His adventure in social media has lasted over 25 years through 3 award-winning personal social media platforms enjoyed by millions of members worldwide. Mark is the author of several books, and today we're going to be speaking with him all about his most recent book, Restoring Our Sanity Online. And I can almost feel our listeners' ears perk up just at the thought of that. His book asks the question, what would social media look like if it nourished our critical thinking, mental health, privacy, civil discourse, and our democracy? Mark has been listed as one of the top 8 minds in online privacy, and was named Privacy by Design Ambassador by the Canadian government. He's also the inventor of 10 revolutionary U.S. patents that disrupt the targeting and data collection underpinnings of surveillance capitalism. This is going to be an important conversation. Mark, welcome to The Evolving Leader.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, John. It's great to be with you guys. You are such great leaders, teaching leaders. And, today we want to talk to everybody. Because everybody uses the web, everybody knows about social media. Virtually all of us use some form of social media, and we've got to fix it. So this is a great conversation.
Welcome to the show, Mark. How are you feeling today?
I'm just gonna double down a little bit on the hope and gratitude, because I love hope, and I think thoughtful prayer is very important too. And I liken hope to being like prayer without action. So when you put hope and action together, magic happens. So let's go for magic.
Excellent. Okay. Cool. Well, let's allow our audiences to get to know you a little bit, Mark. What's the background to your story, and how did you come to focus on social media and surveillance capitalism? What's the journey you've been on?
It's fascinating, everybody, because as we all walk through life, we're just, attracted to and, inventive with our own lives. And for me, it was 1997 in a hike with my 10-year-old nephew on a family vacation. And we had started this dialogue about, it started with, Uncle Mark, it wouldn't be great if we could. And my nephew was just concerned about how we could all stay connected. We all were living all around the world, working, playing. And 10 minutes to them, we were talking about using the web. And we were not talking about email, everybody, because if you're old enough to remember email in 1997, and don't worry if you're not, because it's the same. It's the same in 2024. So it's one dimensional. It's hard to figure out what the other person is really thinking. And it's, in a word, almost dysfunctional. And so what we were looking at was how can we use all this great new technology, to share our lives together as a family and with our friends online. And 10 minutes in the conversation with my nephew, I looked at him, I said, I'm going to start a company. I just thought it was, wow, what a great conversation. And this is how I got into social media. I went back to my home in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I received a grant from the state government, $300,000, great offices. We built the largest commercial server infrastructure in the state of New Mexico. Bill Gates, by the way, had left New Mexico because they wouldn't fund him several years earlier. So when I went to the state and asked for funding, they said, we let Gates go, we're keeping you. Anyway, that's how it starts, and that's Web 1. And I built superfamily.com and superfriends.com. And, listen, there was plenty of technology back then. The web was already 8 or 9 years old. The internet was now part of it. And it was an exciting time. And there weren't bots, and there weren't trolls, and there wasn't boosted content, and there wasn't surveillance capitalism. This is Web 1.
So for our audience, let's define a little bit sort of Web 1, its sort of shortcomings, and then the birth of Web 2 and your involvement in all of that.
Sure. Listen, everybody, Web 1 was pure capitalism. Pure capitalism is when you ideate, you come up with this product or service that serves people, serves your customer, and they love it, and they give you their business. It's great capitalism. And that's really, in the free market. You got to have the free market. So, everybody's inventive, and, who's ever doing well, gets the right solutions, becomes the winners. So, and interesting, it was called the new economy. So for our listeners, Web 1 there was this whole catchphrase called the new economy. And the new economy was not based on revenue in that moment, because the whole idea of the internet and, these services then had all these eyeballs. That was all new. So the magic of Web 1, the money of Web 1 were eyeballs. And we called them eyeballs back then instead of users. It was really, of course you had members, but it was how many eyeballs you could get. And that was how you measured your success, how many users you had. But the investors weren't worried about revenue. Revenue would come later. First, you had to grab as many users as possible. Now, Web 1 lasted from about 98 to 2001. In the middle of 2001, investing is emotional, and the emotions changed. There was a panic. There was a panic, and it was supported by the media about, wait a minute, we've got these sites have all these users, but how are they going to make money? And we were all dependent on the investment capital because we had users, and Superfamily and Superfriends had plenty, but nobody had revenue. So if you read about the history of Web 1, it implodes. They call it the bubble bursting in 2001. Thousands of companies went out of business almost overnight because without investor capital, you didn't have a company. We were still working on how were we going to monetize those eyeballs. So that's Web 1. And, Superfamily, Superfriends, we also had Superfamilia, Super Teams, gone overnight, just like everybody else. So that was the end. And this is where you read about the bubble burst. Web 1 is over. Now, Web 2 starts, there's a washout for a while. The washout lasted. And then, in social media, you look at places like MySpace comes up in this new era called Web 2. Facebook comes up right behind them in this new era called Web 2. But it's MySpace first. It's a big one. Of course, there's Friendster and others. And by the time in the mid-2000s, 2004, 5, 6, 7, 8, Google as a search engine becomes big. Facebook becomes big. It's before they were met, everybody. It's Facebook. MySpace, goes way up, but MySpace has a fundamental error that they never fix. And it starts with the word my. Because they missed the we. So MySpace was all about me. And even if you read about Taylor Swift, she got her social media, sea legs on MySpace. That's where she really started to get her following. But we needed a we there. And this is why Facebook came and ate MySpace's lunch. And by 2007, 2008, MySpace is, really starting to crater. But by 2010, 2011, MySpace is essentially gone. Sold for $35 million and never resurrected in any meaningful way. But anyway, here's what happens. So users become data in Web 2. So, and the masterminds figured out that, wait a minute, we're getting all this information on our users and, there's advertising. Well, let's make advertising very effective and, very connected to our users. So what happened was, this is the birth of what I call the data ecosystem, these massive data companies, which include companies like Facebook and Google, but they're also larger ones that aggregate all of it. And all of a sudden you have a data packet of thousands of pages. And then you've got all these psychologists, data analysts, and surveillance capitalism is born in a way that was never before. Sure, your credit card company in the old days used to know what you bought because, actually you're using their card. So, but now, instantaneously, you were being targeted and, sold. So here's the shift. In Web 2, users became the product sold to the customer. So users are no longer the customer in Web 2. Users are the product. Advertisers, marketers, political operatives, anybody willing to pay to target is now the customer. The user is the product. And that, my friends, is surveillance capitalism. And that's where we got off track in a rather massive way.
So we've had the human rights lawyer, Susan Algare, has joined us a couple of times on the show to talk about the risks to our freedom to think as opposed to our freedom of speech, which is a much more profound thing, because of how social media can interpret and then be manipulated to tell other people how to treat us, and what you're talking about here. And you talk about how social media platforms have employed all these psychologists and data analysts to work together to manipulate us in this way, so that as the product we are more attractive to the advertisers. Can we look at the research you've been doing specifically in that area?
So there is so much research on this. Now, I want to speak to this idea of the freedom of thought, because, fast forward to today, and this has been, the data for a long time. Half of Facebook's users get their news on Facebook. Now, who controls the news that they're getting? Facebook does. So I want to look at this idea of critical thinking. When you're no longer selecting the news that you're receiving, you might still be asking and looking, but they're feeding you. They're feeding you ideas. They're looking at what they think you're interested in, and then they're targeting and manipulating you either to think something different or just to pigeonhole there. So you really, when you look at the idea of the freedom of thinking, you can't really have freedom of thinking if your mind is being manipulated by the data you're being served. And this has been the way it's been for a while. Facebook's algorithms have become very astute over the years, even 10 years ago, very astute at targeting you, manipulating your purchase decisions, your self-images, this idea of teen suicides and things like that. This has been going on for quite a while, the harm of social media. But when you fast forward, gentlemen, to the advent of AI, which is really algorithms on steroids, because they're always, quote, self-learning. But now, the whole algorithm idea is supercharged with this artificial intelligence that can learn on the fly faster than anything in the history of humankind. So at this point, it's anticipating and knowing what you're going to think before you think it. And I wrote about this I didn't write about, I spoke about this in my TED Talk in 2020, The Rise of Surveillance Capitalism, a 9-minute talk, by the way, everybody. So if you want a really fast primer on surveillance capitalism, it's a 9-minute TED Talk. Boom. But Facebook was already buying up companies that could anticipate your thoughts before you think them. And that was all through this advent of AI. So when we talk about what's going on in the world today, and of course the bots and the trolls, this gets complex in terms of the question we have now, especially on a show like this, is how do we restore critical thinking? Because that's where we're at. And we're being interrupted and disrupted. Democracy is being disrupted, and our brains are being interrupted. So, and part of it is, and you can split the egg in half. Part of it is products and services. So the AI is being really intelligent about figuring out what you need, what you want, what your worries and concerns and emotions are, so they can serve you the product, the marketing, everything that makes a social network money or a search engine money, etc. So, but the other piece is that it's looking at what you're thinking and then selling to the political operatives and others who want to manipulate your thought process and have you vote a certain way or have you hate somebody. I like to say, Scott, you mentioned the United States and the elections in this country. I like to say, we don't hate each other in America, but we've been manipulated to. So, and this is where surveillance capitalism has served adversaries, adversarial countries, bots and trolls remarkably well. The service that surveillance capitalism provides to people who want to target and manipulate your thoughts, people who want to disrupt democracy. This is massive, and we've got a big problem.
So what can we do? Because I building on that, the democracy piece, which is obviously very front of mind. There's a Pew Research paper that found that 64% of people found that social media is bad for democracy. So they're agreeing that it's bad for democracy, yet it's not really slowing down engagement, right? So we kind of know we're being manipulated. We know that the algorithm is sending us the stuff we want to see, and then perpetuates a belief, perpetuates divisiveness, all the things you're talking about. And it's not really slowing down engagement, even though there's a growing awareness of the problem. Love to get your thoughts on that.
Well, and let's hit on that first piece as the foundation. It doesn't slow down engagement because it's actually enhancing it. At this point, on almost every interview I do, I'm hearing about the parents and grandparents, never mind the kids who are all addicted, but the parents who can't put X down, because the algorithm is so effective. Because remember, everybody, how it works is keeping you engaged, keeping you on your screen. And the screen's addictive already. And the AI is so smart, it can just keep you hooked. Story after story, it knows exactly where to take you next to keep you hooked, with the outrage and with the whatever it is. Now, there's great news, Scott and John. There's great news, everybody. Fixing this is not that hard. And this is where, John, we talk about the hope and the action together. Because what we need and what we want is for the free market to be restored. We want the free market to work again, because when I compare big ag, big energy, and big tech, and the word big really kind of means monopoly big. And so what happens in a capitalism is in the early stages of a new market opportunity, there's a ton of free market competition, which is really healthy. And then what can often happen is the early successors find investors, because investors like to bet on safe bets. So in the case of big tech, Facebook, of course, MySpace got successful and Murdoch bought it for $700 million, a lot of money at the time. Eventually he sold it for $35 million when, he didn't help it evolve and their team didn't know how to evolve it properly. But Facebook was funded with hundreds of millions of dollars. And then, just like Google was, and then they box out the competition. And this is why, free market democracies really require the government to regulate and break up the monopolies to keep the free market system working. And that's part of the American free market system. The government has very strict antitrust regulations. And in fact, Google was just found guilty, finally, of antitrust infringements in a huge way. The data was massive against Google. But so we need the government to help here, get the free market working again. And they're working on it. They have Meta in their crosshairs, and I've actually been deposed, been subpoenaed, and testified in that case. But also, there's some simple fixes. And we did this on MeWe, my last social network, which I left about 3 years ago to write the book because MeWe is not big enough and strong enough, can't solve the problem by itself. But we need we need a lot of help and a lot of people taking action. But no boosted content, for starters. That's going to take care of, the bots and trolls on X now, they can get a blue check. Because bots and trolls are funded often by adversarial countries, Russia, China, etc. And they have, tens of thousands of them, if not hundreds of thousands of, bots and trolls and people behind them. And of course, they can all be programmed to have a credit card to plug it in to X to get a blue check. And then their content gets boosted. So we really want to make it so that the user chooses what they're following. It's got to be user choice all the time. User choice, user choice. No boosted content, timeline order news feeds, data portability, which is coming. Sir Tim Berners-Lee, the inventor of the web, everybody, he has invented a new system called pods so that we will control our data. Not, it will no longer be centralized in the huge data ecosystem where it's all aggregated, and we'll have total control over it, and we'll decide who gets it, and then we'll pull it back. Now, the government is looking at regulations for data portability so that we can, because right now, if you want to, you leave Facebook, let's say you go to MeWe, you go to Mastodon, you go somewhere else, and then you tell all your friends to come, there's a problem. It's called the network effect. They're all in Meta, they're all somewhere else, and they cannot download their content easily. And even if they can, have you noticed that no one's ever built an uploader for your Facebook content that you downloaded? Because it's impossible. Because Facebook's engineers can change it the next day if anybody ever built one. At MeWe, when I was the CEO, we built a uploader when Google Plus went out of business, so people could download their content from Google Plus in that data packet. And then our engineers engineered an uploader so we could parse and put that up into a new MeWe account for you, put the data in the right places, your photos, your text, your content, all that stuff. No one's ever built an uploader for Facebook. It doesn't exist because, first of all, the packet is so messy, and their engineers can change the packet anytime they want if anybody tried. But with data portability and pods, and these are coming, everybody, we will be able to say, Meta, I'm sorry, but you've lost your right to have my business. And the whole family decides that, and then the whole family moves somewhere else. Just like that. Now that will encourage the free market. That'll help the free market come back. So this is what Tim has been hard work on this. And also, there's something called Web3. And many of you have probably heard this phrase Web3, and there's still a lot of mystification about what is it, and it's involved with blockchain and what is blockchain, and then cryptocurrencies are there. And the book has 3 chapters on Web3. So Web3 has a lot of promises about data portability, data privacy, fair moderation, safety, anonymity. Unfortunately, most of the promises are unfulfilled. And Web3 has a lot of billionaires in the backing of it. Andreessen Horowitz, Jack Dorsey, people that are massively wealthy. So it's not necessarily really the democratic system it's supposed to be. So in the book, I talk about Web 4. We got to catapult. So we've got to move into a new era. Restoration networking, I call it. Restoring Our Sanity Online, of course, is the book. But, where we come together, where users, are a big part. Remember, Facebook makes money because of us, because of its users. same thing with X, same thing with Snap, same thing with this. And TikTok is its own animal, which would require a separate conversation because TikTok is owned by the Chinese, and the Chinese government is involved with TikTok in a very deep way, which is why you saw our government say several months ago that the American version of TikTok must be sold to an American company. There's these issues, but here's the thing, Scott and John, there's hope. There's hope, and there's hope right now because there are places you can start to move to, and also for your kids and everything, because social media is devastating for our children. And remember when I say kids, if you're a 30-year-old, you grew up with MySpace and Facebook. So, our kids are now getting older, and you can see the damage. And some of you are now parents who have young kids. And, really the bottom line is every social media executive I know doesn't let their kids on social media. So, you really have to hold them back. And there will be new regulations around that. And when you're ready, guys, I think we ought to talk about privacy and anonymity, because there's some solutions here that are really critical to how we fix social media.
So before we get onto that, I'm thinking here that a whole generation has been taught, what Kevin Kelly said, the price of social media is transparency. If you're going to get the benefits of social media, you have got to give it what it wants, which is all your information, all your attention. And you're saying that technologies are now possible to be able to keep you from becoming the product and make the social media the product that you experience and you have control about. What do we need to start doing immediately as individuals to kind of be part of encouraging that to happen?
Great question. And really, we almost need to parse it into what do we need to start doing for ourselves and our children? Because, this is critical. And, you guys, we've all heard of this great book by Jonathan Haidt, The Anxious Generation. Because what we're perpetrating on our kids by allowing these companies to, manipulate and control their minds and plant ideas and seeds in their minds that we would never have, we have to address that. And so, one of the things that we want to do is role model. And you start by role modeling. This also takes care of yourself. The first thing is the screen is addictive. So much so that in Sweden, they just came out with the Pediatric Association just came out with a very strong recommendation endorsed by the Swedish government that kids until they're 2 years old don't see a screen at all. Like you don't use your phone in front of them at all. You don't let them see a television screen on at all, because the data is that the screen is addictive. And if you're, like me, I grew up with televisions and telephones, my parents had to regulate those just like we need to regulate today. So we want to get back to no phones at the dinner table, no phones in the bedroom for everybody. Simple things. And also start looking at your time. Your phones can actually, give you a report. Apple, iPhones are very good at this, telling you how much time you're spending every day on your phone, on certain apps, etc. So number one is you want to actually learn to limit your time. Number two is you want to start, with your kids anyhow, you want to delay. And we're seeing this, in the United States, the schools are also banning phones in schools right through high school. You want to delay the age that your kid gets a smartphone. Get them a flip phone. Get them a phone that takes cameras and can text you and talk to you. You want to make sure you're being careful about, how they use their phones. Now, what you guys can do also, what we can all do, is look at the apps that we're using. So, by the way, we should talk about turning off the metadata on your photos. So most of you don't realize that every picture you take on your phone is stamped. It's stamped with the time, it's stamped with the date, it's stamped with the location. And that stamp lives there forever. So anybody who has any good sense of how to find it can find it once that photo's out in the world. So it's really easy to turn this off. You can do this right now. Go to your phone's privacy and security settings, go to the camera settings in there, and turn off the timestamp. Turn off the metadata. It's very easy to find on both iPhone and Androids. So that's something you just want to do immediately. You don't want people to know where you are, when you're there. You don't want people to know where your kids are, where, when, etc. This is so easy. So immediately do that. And then start to watch. For parents, you really need to watch the content because, TikTok has a mission. TikTok, and I apologize to all of you who are maybe also making money on TikTok because I understand that many of us Americans have our businesses on TikTok. But TikTok's purpose with our children, if you put your 13-year-old TikTok for the first time, just take a look at the newsfeed TikTok built for them, and then you'll understand what I'm saying. They are muddying the waters. They are not teaching your kids about science, technology, engineering, and math. They're going to throw violence. They're going to throw sex. They're going to throw all kinds of junk at the young minds of our children. And then they're going to do their best. Through the feed, kids are going to want to become social media stars. And you know what? There's not enough room in the world for every kid that wants to be a social media star. In China, the same app, it has a different name, the content is way different, and kids are limited to 40 minutes a day. So think about that, grown-ups. If China limits TikTok to 40 minutes a day for all their kids, it's time for us to do the same for our kids right here. But we've got to do it because the Chinese government is doing it there. At 40 minutes, that thing times out. We're going to have to help time it out for our kids. This is really important. And it's not that YouTube is that much better. So you really are going to want to start to work with the controls. And also, remember, kids do what we do, not what we say. Now, listen, I know I've got young kids. The last thing they're going to do is, do anything that I won't do myself. And they will say, how kids are. They're going to second guess you and they're going to, they're going to flag it for you, right? They're going to put it in your face. But daddy, you're, So, and listen, it's good discipline. And then, guys, this is simple. Some of these are not with the phone. It's like put the phone down, take your kids outside, and do something with them. Take a walk, have a catch, do whatever it is. All our kids are fascinated. Go look at insects. Whatever your kid's into. Doesn't have to be athletic. It's just got to be something that connects them to the real world. So you really want to look at, a structure for connecting your kids to the real world and yourself. Watch the moonrise, watch a sunrise, watch a all those things that, it's like you look at that, and then you're done. No, pause. There are many things we can do, including voting with, where do we go? What apps do we choose for ourselves? What do we let our kids see that we're watching, etc. I hope that's helpful because there's so many things. The book has
super helpful
punch lists, of how we, get rid of bots and trolls, like 15 things you can do with your kids right now, with yourselves, and also there is, listen, I just want everybody to know, I love social media. You heard the story at the beginning of the podcast about how it started. I love the connectedness. We can stay connectedness, and the evolving leader, what these gentlemen are all about. I mean, connectedness is everything. Authenticity, love. This is really the best use of the web. And we want to get back to those uses, not to disenfranchising, not to disrupting, not to hating. So, and this is where we can, when you're ready, we can talk about the gladiator battle between privacy and anonymity and how we're going to fix that.
Yeah, maybe we should segue into that in a moment. I think so super helpful for me, the advice on parenting and how to set the controls on the phone and limit the date stamps and all those things, super useful. And you talked about how even CEOs of social media companies are preventing their own children from coming on to the very thing that is their livelihood. And I'm thinking about organizations who have dependencies on social media for their organizations, for marketing, all these things. what are the watch outs and the strategies and the suggestions you have for us now? We're not at Web 4. We're in this current reality where Instagram and Facebook and Twitter are kind of the vehicles of the day for much commerce. What is the practical advice you have for leaders listening right now going, I'm on social media all day because it's my job. What do I need to think about?
Listen, and we understand this, right? Because, in capitalism, advertising is a critical component. By the way, I am a pure capitalist. I love capitalism. I think it's a great economic system. I think it gets muddied when we get into monopoly power that, squeezes out the free market. So free market capitalism is brilliant because it allows us to be so innovative and creative with our thinking. And I'm an entrepreneur. I got my first patent, over 30 years ago. So I love ideating about how we can make the world better and more interesting and serve people. And for the marketers, listen, that's the reality. That's the medium today. It's no longer the newspaper or or the billboard as much as it's, getting, one-to-one with your customers. And we understand this. And so, that marketer is kind of stuck in a box. And that's a different, someone who's working for Procter & Gamble or, let's say you've invented a new sports drink or something really cool, healthy, or an advance on, and my first patent was on a bicycle accessory. So we're always ideating, and now we've got to reach the market. So I understand this. And so for you, first of all, you're not doing anything wrong. You've got to deal with your reality. That's a different reality than someone who's perpetrating, a negative, false news story in order to create hostility and change an opinion about something. So if you feel good about your product and you feel good that it's serving, this is really about ethical capitalism. This is where the B Corp movement and the conscious capitalist movement really come into play. So, if you feel, even if your company is not a B Corp or a conscious capitalism corporation, but you're operating with good principles, you ought to feel good about yourself and what you're doing because that's your current reality. Now, it's as they mentioned, I have actually 11 patents now that are assigned to Scruples Incorporated, MeWe, which is MeWe's parent company. But, on how we can personalize and anonymize advertising for people so it's not dependent on their data at all. And I've been building this portfolio since 2012 because I was interviewed on Fox Business the day before Facebook went public, and I said, guys, they've got this wrong. This is creepy. And people are going to figure this out. At first, we thought, wow, that's cool. They know I need dog food, and they know I need some Purina dog chow. Great. How cool is that? There's my coupon. It became creepy overnight when it was like, oh, they're reading everything I'm writing. They know everything about me. They know, how old my dog is, and they know everything. And they being the data ecosystem. So it got creepy fast. So that's different. And so I've been working for years on a very important patent portfolio on how we can serve advertising because we need to. We've got to reach our customers, but how we can do it where the customer is actually involved and completely anonymized. I mean, so that there's no way for a hack to break that anonymity unless the customer breaks it themselves intentionally, gives you their information intentionally. So anyway, but for those, listen, for the corporate world, and I'm an MBA. I went to UCLA. I have an MBA. And my undergrad is in philosophy and sociology. I mean, this is all about ethical capitalism. By the way, I got a C, the only C in my graduate education, guys, and this is one of those little stories, was in my ethics class, business ethics. Okay, I got to tell you, everybody listening, I got to just come clean. I got a C in my ethics class, only C in my graduate school history. And I'll tell you why, because the professor taught us every day to follow the law. And every day I argued with him that wasn't enough. If the company's doing something wrong, but it's legal, you still shouldn't be doing it. So he gave me a C for that. I wear that badge of honor proudly.
You've been making up for it ever since.
That's right.
So let's go back to this gladiatorial battle then. Talk to us about that.
All right. So listen, everybody. Democracy, one of the prizes for humankind in democracies is the right to privacy. So, and this is very important. And, when you look at the American evolution of the democracy and the Declaration of Independence, all the reason was that, the British were loved respect because they're one of our greatest allies and friends. But, the British soldiers were kind of camping in the homes of the, colonial colonists. And people were really offended by that. There was no privacy. So we've evolved, and the web, with the development of the web, anonymity became a prize. So you could terrorize and bully and still, bot and a troll, but also human beings could do lots of terrible things on the web and be completely anonymous. So here's what's happened. What's happened is we have this rather disrupted where, a 13-year-old kid can be, targeted by a 50-year-old creep who's being anonymous. And, a 10-year-old kid can tell Facebook that they're really 23 and set up an account. Now, here's the catch. They already know who we are. We're going to start with this premise. Now, I am one of the world's leading privacy advocates. I've argued against user ID systems for over a decade, 15 years. I've been on government committees where I've said, you guys are loony. There's no way we should ever do this. All right, now it's 2024. They know who we are. The government, the data ecosystem, Google, Meta, the dark web. They all know who we are. Cambridge Analytica leaked 220 data on 220 million Americans. Our data is there. They all know who we are. So why don't we throw away this idea that we're anonymous? Let's just throw it away because it's not real anymore. It's a fantasy. And it doesn't work. It's harming our kids. It's creating massive problems. Bots and trolls are destroying our democracy. Let's have a user ID verification system. I've changed my mind. And I've changed my mind because they know who we are already. So let's stop pretending and let's fix this problem. So the 13-year-old kid is not going to be fished by a 50-year-old creep. And a 10-year-old kid is not going to get on social media because they pretended they were 23. And the bots and trolls are not going to be effective because they're not real. And this is going to take a while to sort out. This is where you use AI for the good guys, because this is going to be very sophisticated. But look, financial services companies already have these things. This is not a new idea. And even MIT and other places say this is pretty easy to implement, and it doesn't have to be the government. The government has to give sort of a stamp of approval to make sure that the verification is real. So that if you're not 13, you're not on social media. Now, the U.S. Surgeon General says it should be 16. I agree, but here's my asterisk. That's never going to work. So let's keep kids off social media until they're 13. Let's get good user ID for all of us, verification. And then let's make sure until a kid is 18, they can't be targeted, no boosted content, nothing manipulative. They can only connect with their peers, etc. But this is all doable. It's all doable. And we do have some good legislation in the United States, the Kids Online Safety Act, the American Privacy Rights Act, and COPPA 2, which are all bipartisan, which have all either gotten through committee. COPPA 2 and COSA, the Kids Online Safety Act, have already passed the Senate bipartisan, and we've got to get the House to pass these. So we need the government to help. And in my book, there's an appendix about what we need the government to do. And of course, then there's all the stuff we do, like keep your kids off social media. Stop giving your kids a phone when you're in a restaurant because it's the easy way for you to have a good time. Forget that. You get kids involved, I promise you, unless it's a really long drive. In our house, the rule is if the drive is less than an hour and a half, you don't get a screen. If the drive is more than an hour and a half, you get 30 minutes on, 30 minutes off. You got to talk to dad. You got to play games. You got to look out the window. We got to see what's going on.
How far away do you think we are from achieving that? What are the obstacles to it? Because the pressure from the monopoly to not do these things is huge, I'm guessing.
John, listen, everybody, what John's saying is exactly right. When the U.S. government surprisingly beat Google just recently, about 6 weeks ago now, and I wrote about this in Newsweek and explained why and how, what Google had done wrong and all the evidence that supported the government, because Google has billions of dollars to pay its lawyers, and the government doesn't. That's not the budget for the Federal Trade Commission. Meta has literally billions of dollars to pay lobbyists and lawyers. The government doesn't. So, John, you're making a very good point. And of course, the government doesn't, and the legislative bodies are dependent on, funding from these sources, from tech and from other big investors who fund their campaigns. So the fact that some of these are moving in a bipartisan way, what I see now, John, is that there's some momentum. Now, after the U.S. elections, I think the first quarter we'll see, and then we'll see, who is really, going to help the kids, if it's a Trump or a Harris. We don't know the answers to this yet because we also don't know the makeup of Congress yet. And so we've got to see this. So you're right, John. There's interference, which is why it took this long to get Google into the courtroom and find them guilty of antitrust. And now there's going to be decisions about how to, break up their stranglehold. Because Google also, if you're Googling for a product on Google, one of the things that came up was every time in the search, their results, the top result is going to be something that they get a piece of the action on. It doesn't look like Google's involved in it, but that's how it's working. And then Google muscled out competition by making deals with Apple and others about who uses their search engine. So Google just muscled everybody out. And then, like Meta, they bought out competitors. So, even Google Maps, right? They bought Waze. They buy everybody, or put them out of business. Same thing with Meta. Why is there only Snap and MeWe, according to the Federal Trade Commission, in the complaint against Facebook? They're the only two personal social networks left. The other ones are not personal. They're not about connecting to your friends and your family at all. So where are the other ones? Well, if you're a monopoly, you buy everybody out and you crush the ones you don't buy out. So, John, good point. It's encouraging that we're seeing, and what it requires is bipartisanship to stand up to the big monopolies and say, hold on, guys, hold on. And the reason in this case it works different than standing up to big ag or big energy is because the legislators see the impact on their children. They see it directly. So they see it on their family members, and that's different. And so it becomes personal.
Excellent. Well, we'll put the link to the book in the show notes and somewhat ironically advertise it all over our social media. But I thank you so much for your insights. I really eye-opening with so much of your research. Your book is an easy read. I really enjoyed it. So thank you for coming on and sharing just a part of it. And folks, we barely scratched the surface. So do make sure you stop and order your copy today. And thank you for your time. And remember, folks, until next time, the world is evolving. Are you?